728. And instead of boom, boom.
Sorry, Chris.
Yeah, I've seen somebody do it. So.
I am opening our school board meeting tonight before we go into closed session. Wanted to see if there are any public comments.
I received no comment cards.
Okay, thank you. Okay, seeing no public comments, we will adjourn to closed session. Thank you so much. Okay, welcome everybody. I'm going to start our meeting. Just wanted to let you know if anybody is here to make public comment, we have cards on the table under the window, and you would fill out a card and submit it to the board secretary. If you're a part of our Zoom audience, you can make public comment by raising your Zoom hand. And for both people that are here and on the Zoom audience, there are several times when you can make public comment to the board. You can do it under our public comment section for items that are not on our agenda. And there's also opportunity during each of our various agenda items. So again, either fill out the card if you're here or raise your Zoom hand. So we welcome all of you. Tonight we have a pretty hefty agenda. So I'll do my best to move us through. Laura, can you do roll call, please?
Student trustee Osuna. Student trustee Stead.
Here.
Trustee Thompson.
Here.
Trustee Stevenson.
Here.
Trustee Sarver.
Here.
Vice President Ginn.
Here.
President Dubois.
Here.
A quorum is present.
And I should also have mentioned that Trustee Stevenson is out of state and is part of our Zoom audience tonight. Okay, next item, we're on item 5 of the agenda, approval of the agenda. Are there any changes? No changes?
None for me.
Can I ask the question of whether are we pulling one item from the agenda? We've got to find it.
Yes,
That would be 15.12.
yes.
Yes.
Okay, somebody like to make a motion?
I'll move to approve the agenda with us after striking 1512.
Second.
In a second?
Yes.
Second, okay. All in favor? All right.
Aye.
Agenda is approved with that one change. I do have one report out from closed session. The board has worked over the last couple of weeks to do our evaluation of the superintendent. She has had a very positive evaluation, and her evaluation document was signed tonight. So congratulations, Dr. Williams. Okay, next is item 7, approval of the consent agenda. Any changes?
I'd like to pull item 715, the gateway contract.
Okay. Anything else? Okay. Can I have a motion to approve?
Move to approve the consent agenda.
In a
A
second?
second.
Okay, and roll call, please.
Student trustee Osuna. Student trustee Stead.
Yes.
Trustee Thompson.
Yes.
Trustee Stevenson.
Yes.
Trustee Sarver.
Yes.
Vice President Ginn.
Yes.
President Dubois.
Yes.
Motion passed.
And you want to speak to 715?
I do. So I've spoken with several members of the San Mateo County School Board who have asked about our board's position about Gateway. And I've told them that I've been not able to talk to my colleagues about their position, but that I would check as soon as I could and circle back. For those of you who have not had contact with any of the San Mateo County Office of Education board members and maybe this, what I'm about to do will help you if that happens, help you with your response as well. So I've spoken to our superintendent about this, and I believe that our position is as follows, and my ask would be of my board colleagues, if you think this is not our position, to let me know, but otherwise this is what I would share with the San Mateo County board members who have asked me about our position. When the Sequoia Union High School District team learned that the Gateway program would be ending after June 30, 2022, they began planning to welcome the former Sequoia students served by the Gateway program back into a program in our district. Initial planning was underway when the potential closing date for Gateway was extended to June 30, 2024. The current plan is for a Sequoia team to work with a county team on exploring various options. One option is improving the existing Gateway program offering and its financial viability. Another option is to create a new program within the Sequoia High School District to meet the needs of students whose needs are currently being met by the Gateway program. There are potential benefits to students of being served more locally, and there are potential benefits to students of being served along with a larger number of peers for whom more specialized programs may be offered because of economies of scale. The current plan is for the Sequoia Union High School District staff to present their findings and recommendation to our board sometime during the 22-23 school year. Since we have time, 1 year to decide and 1 year from there to plan, and the findings and recommendations from our team are not yet known, we do not yet have a position about what we believe should happen next. So I think that's our position. That's my position, that we don't know and that we're waiting to hear recommendations from the superintendent and her team after their exploration for the next year. But I did want to circle back and provide some response. So before I did respond to a question about what we all thought, I at least wanted to share with you. And if anyone thinks what I said is substantially different from what you believe, I'd be interested to hear it.
I think you captured it pretty well.
Yep, I agree. I think that's a good capture of what we've been through, and that there is work in progress that will inform the board.
I guess I'd want to say I'm supportive of that work in progress without knowing how we're going to decide on it after we've seen it. But otherwise, I assume you're not objecting to the action item here, but
I am not. It was a question about, the question to me was about this contract, and since it was on the agenda, it gave me the opportunity to ask.
talk
Since
about it.
their question related specifically to the contract that we're being asked to approve. I do support approving the contract.
Okay.
And I would actually like to interject a little bit at this point, because I was about to pull that item myself. And it was about the current contract. So I am pleased and satisfied with the contents of the contract, but I am highly concerned about the timing of the signatures on that contract. It is for the school year now concluding, and we are effectively approving a contract for the coming 8 days with this action. The contract itself was dated January of this year, but the first signature to appear anywhere on it was mid-May of this year, and now it is late June that it comes to the board. And it is reflective to me of an ongoing challenge that we have had, is that we appear not to be in the habit of being able to really plan effectively in advance with the San Mateo County Office of Education on how our district will continue to participate in the Gateway program. We have been going through this entire school year without a contract in place, clarifying how many students from the district will be served, clarifying what the cost per student would be, clarifying what the actual services would be that are delivered. We have been acting on an expectation of partnership and good faith, and that everything would come out well in the end. And we have confidence in the County Office of Education in continuing to deliver on that kind of a promise. But the nature of a contract is to really lay out those expectations. I do understand, and I very much want to support the strong efforts that are going on to get a clearer picture and a contract in place much earlier in the coming school year for what's going on. I think it's incumbent on our district to ensure that we know how many of our students will have services available to them through this program, what the services of the program will be, and what the cost per student will be to the district. So what I do want to encourage is that we continue having an aggressive and positive continuing focus on this detailed joint planning, and that we have a contract come out of it that we can all be very confident that the best service is rendered to the number of students who need it at a fair price.
Wonder, so following up on Alan's comment, since this contract ends June 30th next week, effectively, and as far as we understand, we don't have a contract for the coming year. I wonder whether we might, check with the superintendent to see if it's reasonable to expect that we'll see a contract fall quarter.
Yeah, thank you, trustees, and trustees Thompson, to your question. Yes, we will have a contract in the fall. We are currently in a conversation for the logistics around next year's agreement in terms of seats and cost. And so Crystal Leach and myself have been working with the county team, Office of Education. And so you will have a contract in the fall.
So are we saying, are we going to move forward with approving this contract?
I
as
have
written?
my
I move
hand
approval
up.
of the contract.
Hold
Maybe
up,
I
I have
check.
my hand up. I have my hand up.
Oh,
Oh, Shawnee's. Sorry.
It's
Oh my
me.
goodness, you had to scream. I'm not looking at the hands. Go ahead.
I just wanted to appreciate Trustee Ginn for bringing this up. I do think I do think some of our community is confused about this. I've had a couple of community members come to me about this. They're happy that we're planning over the next year. I think that's been the message I've been sharing, that we're trying to figure that out, of what that looks like in a year. And I do think this is a tricky issue. So I want to make sure that we have good communication with our community, not just with County Office of Ed, of what we're doing. Because I've had several people come to me about this one and wondering, what are we doing, since we, according to their report, that we have a high number of our students at Gateway. And so I do behoove us to have some type of communication go out to our community about what our stance is. And I love how Trustee Jen really wrote that. And I wonder, Dr. Williams, if it's appropriate from your perspective to send something out to our community about this.
Absolutely, we can provide a status update to the community in terms of where we stand as a district in our planning process.
Is that okay, or do we take a vote to make sure that's, if that can be a direction for her? Or I know that's my recommendation, but I'm not for sure if the other 4 board members agree.
I second the recommendation, or I'm in agreement with that recommendation.
Okay.
I don't think I caught it completely. Could you repeat what you said? Sorry.
So my understanding is that the recommendation is to make sure there's communication to go out to community members, summarizing the status of the Gateway school opening or closure for the 23-24 school year.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
And thank you for that recommendation, Shawnee's. So I think I
Okay,
do have a
thank you.
motion, right?
Second.
And a second? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
So 5?
Thank you.
5 in favor. All right, thank you for that. Okay, now we are on item 8 of the agenda, special recognitions.
Okay, this is the great part of the agenda. Glad to see everyone out. This is our last meeting of the 21-22 school year. And so what better way to close up and wrap up our board meetings is with celebration. And so I am going to have the principal of Middle Atherton High School come forward. Principal Lusku.
Right. Thank you, Dr. Williams, and thank you, trustees. I had such a good time the last time I was here recognizing one of our staff members that I wanted to take the opportunity to recognize 3 of our staff members because it was so much fun. And these are 3 people. One I believe is listening online, and that's Sylvia Torres. I don't know if you want to put her on the panel just so we can see her, but I know she's listening. The 3 people that I want to recognize tonight are 3 people that really make MA great and make MA run. And the first I'm going to talk about is Maria Luisa DeSeta, who, let me start off by saying, I often, as an administrator, I often wonder about my value. And I realized, you're so close to the role. And I realized the other day, last week, when I went to Ms. DeSeta, and I was panicked about supplies because Ms. Carson was texting me about, what about supplies for Compass? I was like, oh man, okay, let's go talk to Ms. DeSeta. And well, Mr. Seta had like, oh, no, we sent an email 2 weeks ago. We communicated this way. All the supplies are back there. And I thought, that's the value of an administrator, right? They've got it all figured out. You don't even know they're there. They've provided, it runs really smoothly.
Wow.
And she's done a fantastic job being the principal of summer school this year. And this is her 2nd year. And it is perhaps the smoothest summer school that I've seen from my perspective. And she's really done a fantastic job navigating the hiring, the contract situation, working with Compass, the registration situation, working with the district. It's really been remarkable. So I think you've done a fantastic job running Compass this year. Thank you. I mean, running summer school this year. Thank you. He is also stepping up to be our world language department chair. Sorry, I'm not done. Our world language department chair. And has done several things. She's led staff professional development. She has participated in the Mara Benitez Affinity Group leadership workshop and helped lead a anti-racist white affinity group on MA's campus. So I look at Ms. DeSeta as a real emerging leader, if not already a strong leader on campus. And so thank you so much for your work, Ms. DeSeta. And in 1 second, I think we're going to have people come up and take a picture with Dr. Williams. Okay. And so the next person I'd like to recognize is also here is Ms. Carson. Ms. Carson and the following person are real, Ms. Torres are real engines for MA. They are, I don't know how to put it, leaders in every way. Ms. Carson in particular is somebody who is always thinking about something that I know I should be thinking about. You know, whether it's thinking about attendance, how do we focus on our kids that aren't here? How do we do more of that? How do we help kids that are struggling? How do we become stronger liaisons with our feeder schools, right? What can we do? Let's get a lunch together with our principals, right? Constantly thinking about things and constantly up to date to the point where she knows what's happening before I do. It's really remarkable. What I'm really recognizing her for, though, and what we want to highlight is her work getting seniors across the finish line this year. And she is an amazing liaison between parents and teachers with students in the middle. She is our SAP coordinator, our Sequoia Aspirations Advocate program coordinator. And she does, again, remarkable job of looking at the kids, helping the kids prioritize what they need to finish to graduate. What class do they need to do? What assignment in that class? Let's look at Canvas together. Let's go talk to the teacher together. Let's encourage you. Let's help you go talk to the teacher. Let's talk to the parent. How do we make time to get this done? Do we need a meeting with all the stakeholders on campus? She does that time and time again. And there are a number of seniors who would not have graduated if it were not for her help. And that's why we're recognizing Ms. Carson today. So thank you. And the third engine of MA is Ms. Torres, who is our head guidance counselor. And oh, there she is on the picture there. She is, I don't think there's a constituency or faction on campus that does not respect Ms. Torres. It is really incredible. And I don't know if I can say that about anybody else. And because of that, she ends up on every committee possible, right? She serves on every possible committee. The Bell Schedule Committee, SDMSC, You want to talk to Equity Steering Committee, the the District Counselor Committee. If you have a committee that you want run and you want somebody who is grounded, thoughtful, can look at perspectives from a student's perspective, from a parent's perspective, from a counselor's perspective, from a teacher perspective, Ms. Torres is your person. And that's why she does everything on campus. And she's tremendously respected, right? Everything that comes, if she makes a recommendation, it is something that you need to seriously think about. And I often feel like, you know what, if she's recommending it, we should probably do it. She also, want to point out that she supports everybody, including Ms. DeSeta, Ms. Carson, and myself. A lot of teachers, a lot of staff members go to Ms. Torres for advice. She is a tremendous asset to our community, and personally, both to me personally and to our community. And so I want to thank you, Ms. Torres, for everything that you do for MA. These are 3 amazing sessions. Dr. Williams, do you want a picture?
It's not just a picture. Yes, I do. I just wanted to say this is so perfect and the way to end the year. And I just want to personally say, this is the bow on the great gift of having this position and working in this wonderful community. I can just say personally, my interactions with Jenna Carson from day one, she has kept me on top of things and she keeps me aware. She asks the hard questions and she does it in a way where you can tell that her heart is in the right place, not only for students, but for staff and for all of us in Sequoia Union High School District. I could say the same about Ms. Torres Garza. She keeps me on task and she will also ask the hard questions and then also provide support. And when you say organize and be a part of a committee, that she is not only an organizer, she also is a person that will take the ideas and put them into action for the betterment of our students and also for our school district. And then also the same for Ms. DeSeta, and her work as well is just excellent in terms of making sure that her advocacy, children first. A lot of people say kids first, but she doesn't have to say it. It's in her action, it's in her work ethic. And I know that personally of all 3 of you. And I just want to say that I truly appreciate you. And this year you all have been tremendous support. And I hope I have supported you as well. Now, drum roll for the exciting part. Certificate of recognition. Yes, drum roll. That's my favorite part. Certificate of recognition. The Sequoia Union High School District Board of Trustees proudly recognizes all of you. 1, Jenna Carson, for your dedication, passion, and contributions to the students and families of Menlo Atherton High School as a Sequoia Aspirations advocate. Please come forward. Certificate of recognition. The Sequoia Union High School District Board of Trustees proudly recognizes Sylvia Torres Garza for your dedication and outstanding collaboration efforts as a school counselor and everything else, and multi-group committee member at Menlo Atherton High School. And right alongside, I won't say last, but right alongside of greatness, certificate of recognition. And then we see, okay, Sylvia can see us still. The Sequoia Union High School District Board of Trustees proudly recognizes Maria Luisa DeSeta for your dedication, outstanding leadership, and contributions to educational excellence at Menlo Atherton High School. Round of applause, everyone.
Oh, they hear me talk all the time. I just appreciate the support and I recognize everyone working in June. So some of us are still working almost every day and it's because the school year doesn't really stop. Families are still in need and kids still need support and administrators are still on campus trying to get the job done. So we're all still here to do the work too. Thank you.
Huh? Oh.
I'd say that, looking into someone has this really opportunity to serve my students more than not just in the classroom, but also to work with the staff and everyone else at NA to have this community grow. Thank you so much.
Sylvia, did you want to say anything?
I'm not one for speeches, so just thank you. Yeah, thank you, Carl, for your words. I truly do appreciate them. And that's it. Thank you, board, for recognizing me this evening.
Thank you, everyone.
Congratulations, everyone. That was really wonderful. Thanks. Okay, moving on. We are now at item number 9, student trustee comments. And I think we have the passing of the baton.
Hello, everyone. Hello, everyone. Thank you so much. I'm quite sad to be here tonight. It's officially Carlos's and my last meeting as trustees and kind of our last event really as high schoolers. But when I first started attending these meetings as trustee over a year ago, I had no idea all that I would experience and I had no idea how amazed I would have been at all this board has accomplished over the past year, from increased consent education to the community college MOU. This is officially, as I mentioned, our last meeting, and we are both so grateful that we have been able to serve our fellow students in our work as trustee. We have learned so much about our school district, and I think I speak for both of us when I say this position has taught us more than we ever thought it would. We have grown as students, as leaders, and as people, and we would like to thank all of the board members and Dr. Williams, Ms. Handsome, Ms. Leach, Dr. Chacon, and Ms. Lause for all that they have taught us and for how they have continuously put student needs first and listen to the stakeholders in our district. Thank you so much. And now I pass it on to Carlos to introduce our very worthy successors.
Well, since this is my last one, I'm not going to go down without a fight. So, ladies and gentlemen, Board of Trustees, good evening for the last time as your student trustee. While it's melancholy to be giving my very last comments from this lectern, I have the great privilege and high honor of introducing the student trustees for the 2022 to 2023 school year. Great. Before I announce these two, don't look, I told you it's a surprise. Before I announce these two outstanding individuals, I would first like to make some final remarks. First off, I'd like to thank Isabel for being such an amazing colleague throughout this process. Going into this, I was hoping desperately for a partner that I could rely on, trust, and most importantly, be able to call my friend. After all this was said and done at like 11 p.m. Isabel, you'll go far in life. And when you do, I'm happy to say that I'll be the guy that points to you on the TV screen and says, I knew her in high school. The memories, experiences, and the lessons I've learned from you will always hold a special place in my heart. Thank you, Student Trustee Stitt.
Teamwork.
And then, while I couldn't have done this without Isabel, none of us could be here without the persistence and precision of one person in this room tonight. Laura Lause is an institution of this district. She's a class act and the most valuable asset this district has. Laura, if this district were a tower, you'd be the foundation. Your work behind the scenes to ensure that everything is running smoothly is instrumental to the work that this district does. Laura is the living embodiment of what SUHSD strives to be: consistent, persistent, and effective. Please, everyone, let's give a hand to Laura for all that she does for us in the school district.
Thank you, Carlos. Thank you, Isabel. It's a pleasure working with you both.
So well deserved.
Now that that's out of the way, it's finally time to introduce our new student trustees. Over the last year, Isabel and I have developed a pattern. Isabel's the brains of this operation, while I'm the mouth. With these roles, we were able to represent SUHSD students to the best of our abilities and advocate for them to deliver results. These two students harness those skills and other unique ones that I know will help them in their work to represent our shared constituency. First up is Avantika. She has an entrepreneurial spirit and a passionate soul. She says in her own words, she's an aspiring chocolatier, though I'd say owning your own chocolate business as a high school junior puts you a few steps above aspiring. She attends Carmont High School and is actively involved in the effort to make her community a more inclusive and accepting place, often facilitating conversations with that effort in mind. Her passion for the goal of compassion has encouraged her to become president of Carmont's GSA. She'll use her strong voice to both represent her new constituency and continue her advocacy to broaden student understanding by reducing misrepresentation in curriculum and increasing appreciation of other cultures. Samantha Rodriguez Velasquez, and by the way, Avantika could not join us tonight physically. She's here on Zoom. I know, there you are. And then Samantha, Sam behind me, is a proud student of the Middle College Program, a program that SUHSD regards with much pride. Sam has grown to deeply understand and appreciate the functions of this district during her last year on the SAC, which she'll now be leading along with Avantika. As presiding officers of the SAC, Isabel and I came to greatly appreciate Sam's reliability, laser sharp focus, and readily available contributions to any and all discussions held. She is always seeking the best solutions for the various challenges posed to SUHSD students and is ready now to face them head on. These qualities and her love of coffee will ensure that Sam is always performing at her best during her term as student trustee. And I'm just kidding, Sam, please don't drink too much coffee. Both truly understand the importance of listening, representing, and advocating for their peers in this district. I'm proud of the successors Isabel and I were able to choose during and the interview panel during our round of interviews. I'm proud that so many other SUHSD students who weren't chosen for the position will be here to support these new trustees over the next year. Now, I'm sure after a year of me, you've all had enough of hearing my voice. So now it's my great privilege to introduce the new SUHSD student trustees to present to you all Avantika and Sam. So Avantika, if you want to share, you can unmute yourself, kind of introduce yourself, and then we'll have Sam come up afterwards.
Yeah, I don't have much to say at this point, but just thank you, Carlos, for that wonderful introduction. And I really look forward to making some changes and being a great part of this community and being a voice for the students in this district. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. Oh, wow, this is interesting. Yes, I just like to repeat Avantika's sentiments. I'm really excited to work with all of you, and thank you to Carlos and Isabel for being the leaders. And I was honestly, a big part of my inspiration for applying to this position was because of them, because of seeing the way that they communicate with others and the way that they articulate. I kind of wanted to grow to become more like them, in service of the district, of course. So I'm really excited, and thank you.
And so as you take your seats, have something to take with you that you can cherish with your name. And this is both to Carlos and Isabel. Again, we appreciate you. I look forward to working with both Samantha and Avantika as we continue to do the good work in our district. Thank you both. Oh.
Thank you, Carlos and Isabel, for showing us what great leaders look like. So you have really been an inspiration to all of us. That was great. Okay. Now on to comments from the Sequoia District Teachers Association.
I see Trustee Stevenson has her hand up, so I'm going to defer to her before I begin.
I think that was a mistake. I will lower my hand.
Okay. Well, hello, I am also joining you remotely from South Lake Tahoe. So if you hear commotion in the background, it is my children and their uncle playing board games downstairs. Tonight is officially the last board meeting of the 2021-2022 school year. And as such, I've been doing some end of the year reflection. This year has been a challenge, from the joy of being able to be back together with our communities and our students, to the fear faced with each new exposure notification or message from a friend who was out sick, through the challenges of relearning the in-person dynamic and teaching so many more students what it means to be a student in a school and classroom community again. We also had many new people to meet and personalities to learn, new priorities to embrace, and renewed ambitions to work towards. Like many of my colleagues, I ended the year exhausted. I have heard from so many that this was the hardest year of their careers, and from too many that this was their last year, either with us or in the profession. I'd like to take this opportunity to address all those whose time with us is ending. We didn't have our normal opportunity to recognize retirees, so I'd like to take this moment to thank them for their service to our students and their friendship over their careers. For those who are moving to other teaching opportunities, I wish you full classrooms of eager learners and a school community that recognizes how hard you work and the skill and passion you bring to your job. And for those who have decided to move on from education, I hope your new journeys challenge and satisfy you professionally, and that you are able to look back on your time in the classroom and with our students fondly. Personally, I hope to be able to unplug over the next 7 weeks and recharge for the year to come. I'm looking forward to asking the students presenting on sustainability how you manage to recharge without plugging in. I know there will be challenges awaiting me when I return in August. There always are, but I'm hopeful we'll be able to come together to meet whatever new challenges are placed before us. Looking at the roster of teachers, counselors, psychologists, librarians, speech and language pathologists, and specialists who will be returning in the fall, I am confident that we can succeed, that we can reflect on this hardest year ever and find the positive takeaways to build on, and that we will move forward. We will do this in partnership with district and site leaders who are committed to continuing to improve our schools, and with a vigilance that may have been hard to access in the recent past. Nobody said that working in education was going to be easy, and if they did, they'd clearly never tried it. So thank you to everyone who has done their best and is committed to continuing that work. I'll see you in August.
Thank you for your comments. Next is American Federation of State, County, and Municipal Employees. Don't think we have anyone here. Okay. So that will take us to public comment. Are there any comments on items not on the agenda?
I've received no comment
No
cards.
comment cards, and I don't see any hands up. Okay. So no public comment. We are now on item 12, information item, presentation by the Sequoia Union High School District Sustainability Committee.
Are we good? Okay. Hi, everyone. Thank you for making the time for us to speak today. I'm Sarah Typrin. I'm here with other committee leaders, Brandon Wee and Sophia Bai, as well as YCA Carlmont students, Naharika Parchenda and Kara Kim. We are here to request your support on district sustainability issues. So if you don't know, the Sequoia High School District Sustainability Committee is student-led, and it includes students, teachers, and site-level administrators to a variety of different stakeholders. And this year, 3 subcommittees carried out projects demonstrating that this leadership model is effective. The committee is also continuing momentum with this momentum next school year. So now I'll pass it on to Sophia, who will highlight how the district can support these efforts and signal a commitment to sustainability.
Thanks, Sarah. So one way the district can honor the adults, including certificated faculty, thank you, co-chair leaders of each of our 3 subcommittees and board of trustees in our committee is by providing stipended positions. These stipends would be a solid step towards institutionalizing sustainability and have been voted in favor by a majority of our members to ensure the continuity of the committee and the movement towards sustainability. We can take a look at San Mateo Unified High School District's example to better understand what these stipends may look like. In their committee, they have 1 district-wide sustainability facilitator, and they are paid $8,000 a year. They also have multiple site-level sustainability facilitators representing each of their sites at $2,500 a year. We would also greatly appreciate if the district board could support a website or a webpage on the district seq.org site showcasing the projects our subcommittees have been working on. Through this page, stakeholders and members can get an overview of what initiatives are currently ongoing in our committee, much like how the San Mateo District Sustainability page works, which you can see on the screen right now.
And another way we can institutionalize this committee is through the Green Ribbon School Award. So this award is held by the California Department of Education and is eligible for schools, school districts, and counties who demonstrate progress based on 3 pillars: reduction of environmental impact and costs, health and wellness of students and staff, and environmental and sustainability education. And the Green Ribbon School Award aims to facilitate state and local collaboration around school facilities, health, and environmental education. The application opens in August and runs through November, and the award application consists mostly of audits and data gathering. However, we already have access to a large amount of data from the energy and waste audits, as well as the environmental literacy survey, which all have been conducted in the past year or earlier. The San Mateo County Office of Education is also willing to provide free assistance with the application, audits, and assessments. And as you can see, schools around us are applying and receiving the Green Ribbons Award, including schools in our own district. The award importantly provides a baseline of where the district is in terms of sustainability, setting groundwork for future projects. To help achieve this goal, YCA students, Kara and Naharka, have developed a proposal for progressing sustainability within the district.
Hello, I am Naharka Rashanda. I, along with Kara, worked on energy efficiency as part of our YCA Community Impact Project. On the subject of LED lighting, in the 2015 Facilities Master Plan, there was a commitment to install LED lighting in the D&E wings of Chroma.
Can you pull the microphone a little closer to you?
Oh, sorry.
It's flexible.
Yeah, sorry. In its 2021 report, ABM Building Solutions recommended retrofitting schools in the district with LED lighting and noted that LED lights do not make up a majority of the lighting and that current lights have poor efficiency compared to LEDs. To our knowledge, exterior lighting was replaced in 2017 and interior lighting has not been replaced yet. LED lights use less energy and make both financial and environmental sense. They are simply a bread and butter common sense component to making the district more energy efficient and sustainable.
So in addition to the installation of indoor LEDs, we're also in need of the installation of more solar panels at Carmont High School. As mentioned by Naharka, we found an energy audit done of the Sequoia Union High School District by ABM Building Solutions in July of 2021 that recommended installing more solar panels at Carmont, as well as, I believe, Sequoia and Menlo Atherton specifically, to save $80,000 specifically at Carmont and have uninterrupted learning during power outages, among other benefits. For example, the power outage yesterday left my entire area without power. There's also the overarching benefit, obviously, of having cleaner energy and helping the environment, which is extremely important during this time. Also, as mentioned previously, the San Mateo High School District has already taken big steps towards sustainability. Cappuccino High School in particular has large solar panel canopies in its parking areas, which would be great to have Carmont as well. We are aware that the board has taken an interest. We are aware the board has taken an interest in these improvements. And we found the letter intent that was created in October of 2021. Regarding this letter, we would like to ask what actions have been taken and what is the progress on the engineering study, if it ever happened. We hope that the process is sped up because of how important it is for these changes to be made. In summary, in this presentation, we are asking the district to consider adopting the following actions to demonstrate our commitment towards sustainability and help contribute to the continuity of this movement. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm sure there are comments and questions from board members. Alan?
So, President Dubois, along with you, I've had the privilege of working on the sustainability committee this year with many of the students here. We've also had a separate presentation from the other group of ambassadors that weren't involved in that. It is first and foremost tremendous to have this kind of student voice come to the board, come to the district. The kind of thought and organization and effort and structure that you've all brought to the work has been tremendous. It has truly been a student-led effort throughout the year. And you have done a tremendous job of bringing along staff and administrators to make sure that progress was being made. The presentation that you just completed really demonstrated how you are bringing external resources and structure to the conversation. You are bringing examples of nearby communities that are taking action. You are bringing suggestions, recommendations, directions that have been well thought out and are, if not completely actionable already, ready for active embracing by the district to really look forward to action. And to me, I certainly hope we have more board comments on this. I would lean very strongly toward recommending as one board member that we look at each of the 4 proposals that you've included there to see how much we can do to move forward with each of them as a district. I think each of them have different resources and supports that you've outlined that we can leverage off of, and opportunities to really move forward with them. In particular, as we continue with the facilities master planning and with the progress on the bond we are making, sustainability is an area of work that we intend to include. And I hope that student representation from this group will be part of our team as we go forward there, both to have the advantage of all of the thought and preparation you've already done and to hear your voices, but also to give you the active opportunity to really be right there in the middle of the works and to have the learning opportunity and the satisfaction of making more of this happen in a real manner. And the last thing I wanted to throw out there, we have now had, we are seeing a transition here similar to what we are seeing with our student trustees. We have presenters here who are not students of this district. They are recent graduates of this district. I had the great good fortune of meeting Sarah for the first time in person with a handshake at Woodside a couple of weeks ago. And after many meetings on Zoom where a lot of this was moved forward. And in both cases, with both groups, we have seen a tremendous example of student leadership of the benefits of continually bringing student voice more and more into the leadership of the district, and really supporting that opportunity for you to blossom and show how much you bring to us. And in both cases, we've seen a very high bar set, and we've seen a very careful handover to the next generation to keep it going. So we are very appreciative of the work that has been done to date. And I, for one, very much look forward to the continuing partnership that this group is going to bring in the coming years. So thank you very much for that. And I hope we have a lot of action come out of it.
Thank you for your comments, Alan. I also wanted to say I really appreciated participating in the Sustainability Committee. And I've shared this before, but there's some new people up here, so sorry to repeat myself. The committee had a huge impact on me personally. I now, it may be small, but I pack my lunch now in a environmentally sustainable way. I have given up bottled water, which was not easy. And in one of my last conversations with the superintendent, I brought up one of the things I learned on the committee, that we have a problem when it comes to disposing of textbooks. And it's a huge problem in our district. That's something I did not know about. I didn't know about the complexity of removing some of the older items off of our campuses. So I appreciate what you have taught me personally. I also was involved in a memorial service, and we had a lot of people there, hundreds of people, and we made sure to use compostable items. So that's all because of what you have taught me. And I do hope that we can continue this work. It's not easy to make change in a school district, but you all have had just high impact on us. And I think it is going to result in changes in our system. And it's very exciting that this was student-led. So thank you again. Any other comments, Chris?
I want to quickly speak to concur with my colleagues in recognizing the work you've done and the importance of what you're talking about. In terms of action, I guess I'd hope for three things: that the board might see in the newsletter through the superintendent how we might respond to the recommendations you've made. I think that would be, if my colleagues agree, it seems like that would be an appropriate thing to do. Two, I did have the privilege of working with our chief business officer and looking at the ABM Solutions guidance. And I think that will be good for us to see at the board. I'm not sure what its readiness is right now, but I think that's a helpful kind of look that you suggest to us. And the third thing that Alan mentioned is, I think to pay for the changes you're talking about and meaningful sustainability moves, it really does take more resources for the district, and in particular the bond initiative, which we're going to be talking about later today. I would hope would give us the resources to do the real work that you're talking about and make a difference. Also, as a final comment, I think public institutions, to some extent, this is an area where we need to lead, and your leadership in that has been important. So thank you very much.
Rich?
Just curious, do we have any of you that aren't seniors that'll be around next year? Or is everybody graduating? Still got a few staying back. Okay, awesome. So I appreciate the advocacy by students and to help sustainability, the district helping with our part for the environment. Just commenting on the solar panel, some things that we'll likely be talking about at some point during the next academic year or on the school board. That'd be great if you're able to tune in or have discussions offline about it, but specific to like the solar panels, just some things that I think about, maybe my colleagues think about as well, but that $80,000 savings comes at a cost, and those costs will be taxes that we have to assess to our taxpayers to pay for those panels. So we're trying to look at how much would that be versus how much the electricity would be to see what sort of yields we get on our investment and whether that we feel is a good rate for what the taxpayers have to pay for the electricity that's generated. And there's a lot of what makes it a great real world problem, a lot of moving uncertainties, the cost of the panels, the cost of maintenance, the price of electricity. So there's a lot of things that are moving around. And another thing that we'll be looking at is the model. One is that we buy it, we own it, we maintain it, or the district does and hires people who do that. The other would be that you effectively lease the space on the roofs to a third party that puts them on and pays you in electricity or some other model from there. So there's a lot of different models for how you actually go from a roof with no panels on it to roof up with panels with the different players that are maintaining, installing, and the contract. So there may be a lot that we're exploring as a board and in deciding what direction. And I think for those of you who have an interest in this area, it could be interesting for you to participate or listen in on those discussions. So I appreciate student interest in something as important as this, and it'd be great if some of you are choose to stick around as we discuss these things. Maybe, I don't know, the best way to keep them informed of when these things will be on the agenda, because it's hard to keep track of everything, but it'd be great to have, you know, your voices and thoughts when we get to those decisions. So thank you.
Shanice?
Okay, thank you, Carrie. President Dubois, I wanted to thank the youth for their presentation. I really appreciate it. We've gotten a lot of emails regarding this, so sometimes it's just nice to have it in full presentation mode so that we can hear it from beginning to end and understand. I do have a couple of questions for the group, and maybe my colleagues can answer this. There's been a couple of groups around climate change and all that stuff who have been talking to us, and I'm kind of confused of who this is and who that other group is, and is this a group that's working with our district or is this an outside group? So I'm just a little confused about that, and then I have a couple other questions.
Does someone want to clarify? I think it's the county group versus the Sequoia.
So we're basically speaking on behalf of the District Sustainability Committee, which I guess is associated.
Okay.
And then these two people come from YCA, who also are working on sustainability efforts, specifically energy in school districts. So we weren't really affiliated before, but now we're working together in this presentation.
Oh, okay. So now your requests are in line with each other, not competing.
Yeah, they follow the same theme.
Okay, great. Because I was a little confused about each group. Okay, and what and in your group, what staff are you working with right now in sustainability work? Or I'm sorry, on climate work.
Like the staff in our committee?
No, the staff of the Sequoia Union High School District. Who are you working with right now?
We're working with Alan Sarver and Trustee Dubois. They are kind of represents the district board in our committee. And then there's a bunch of teachers and other district representatives who also attend. So it's kind of a large pool of people.
Okay. And then if you're working on a group, how would designating staff would be different than working on this group as a committee? Like how would that be different, and how would that impact the work or not impact the work?
Well, for a couple of reasons. One, having those different voices together actually makes it easier to coordinate efforts. For example, like waste, you need the students to get more people to sort waste. And then on the other side of that, there's the administrators who are actually responsible for making sure that waste is sorted correctly, meets the standards. So that kind of like cross leadership, different kinds of leadership makes things easier to happen, makes things happen easier. So that's one reason why having all these people together actually makes things more efficient.
Okay. And then I noted that you looked at San Mateo Unified High School District as a model. Are there any other models that you looked at on how to move forward the recommendations that you have? Not talking about staffing, but are there other models out there on
Committee
how?
model?
Yeah, committee models, because you're asking for staffing is basically what you're asking for,
Right.
and time commitment.
Well, like you said, San Mateo High School District has a little bit different structure. I'm pretty sure their stipended positions are like sent to specific people at sites so that there's representation from each school site. And I don't know if they have subcommittees.
Okay.
And then there's Cabrillo Unified School District, who we've also been looking at. Their school district includes elementary schools to high schools. So I think it does look a little bit different from how the Sequoia Union High School District does it.
Okay, gotcha. Thank you so much for bringing this attention. I just had those few questions. Thank you. And Carrie, someone put a note into chat.
Thank you very much. Great presentation. Thank you.
You didn't have a comment, did you? Did you have a comment? No.
I think Carol Ann had a comment in
Okay,
chat, but
we are now on item 12.2 of our agenda. That's the report on the equity audit.
All right, well, good evening, President Dubois, members of the board, and Dr. Williams. I would like to introduce Cheryl Hiblin and Dr. Suzette Lovely from Illumined. They will present to the board their preliminary report and findings from the audit of the district's process and procedures in relation to human resources, and to identify any barriers that may restrict equal opportunities and assessments for our students. So they are joining us virtually, and so I will turn this over to them.
Good evening, Superintendent Williams, President Dubois, and board trustees. It's great to be here tonight to deliver the human resources and schools and schedules components of our equity audit. As was just mentioned, my name is Cheryl Hiblin, and I'm the president of Illuminate Ed Collective, an educational consulting group contracted by the superintendent to conduct an equity assessment within your district. Prior to founding Illuminate Ed, I spent 21 years in San Diego Unified, 10 as a high school principal and 6 at central office supporting secondary efforts. I'm joined tonight by Dr. Suzette Lovely, retired superintendent from Carlsbad Unified School District, who spent 10 years as a deputy superintendent of HR prior to her superintendency. Dr. Lovely completed the human resources portion of this assessment. As a reminder, the scope of work for this assessment included working collaboratively with the superintendent to examine the delta between the district's vision for equity, as reflected by Board Resolution 1699 and governance team goals effective July 31, 2021, and the impact of system processes, procedures, and practices on student achievement. Our scope was limited to a review of human resource, finance, and schools and schedules, and we examined each area. As we examined each area, we kept our focus on equity, specifically asking ourselves throughout the process whether there were any opportunities for the district to explore changes to processes, procedures, and practices that would ensure and strengthen alignment between policy and implementation. As we discuss our assessment methods, I want to point out that we are not researchers. Our lens was that of leadership and systems expertise. Qualitative and quantitative data was collected through stakeholder interviews, of which we did more than 50, which I would define more as conversations, artifact analysis, and data reports. Our findings and recommendations are just that, recommendations. Whether or not there is agreement with or action taken on these areas of opportunity will be for Sequoia Union High School District to decide. Tonight's presentation will begin with the key findings and recommendations from the Human Resource Review. And with that, I'm going to hand things over to Dr. Lovely.
Thank you. Good evening, Trustee, Superintendent Williams, and staff. We appreciate being invited here this evening to share our findings. As Cheryl mentioned, my role in the equity assessment involved looking at the structures, systems, policies, and practices that underscore the recruitment, hiring, staffing, and retention of employees across your district. And so during this review, 5 findings emerged that present opportunities. As Cheryl mentioned too, we looked for opportunities to accelerate your equity work surrounding personnel-related functions. So the first finding revealed some gaps in some department staffing ratios and workflow. And one example that was presented to us is departments like special education and student services are in 2 different divisions. Special education is under ed services, student services is under the assistant chief of student services. And so staff members in both of these departments reported some redundancies as well as some gaps in services. For example, counseling is in one place, psychologists and other support services are in another place, and some of the functions overlap and some of them don't. So there's opportunity there to review some of those services and create better alignment. And along similar lines, the job descriptions, specifically in human resources, those are the ones that I examined most closely because that was the department I was asked to look at. But I heard this from the other departments that I spoke to. The job descriptions aren't necessarily updated to match current roles and responsibilities. Some of them, the job descriptions have been around for a long time and people's jobs have changed. So that's again another opportunity, including mid-management level support and where that might come from. So within that examination, some responsibilities might be outdated and eliminated from job descriptions because they're no longer being done and others may need to be added. And there is finally a need in this finding for some clear protocols for adding new positions or reclassifying existing management specific positions particularly, so people aren't sure how new positions get added or how they're reclassified, and so some protocols would be helpful. In finding 2, I understand that some of this is already in the works with the distinctions between and clarity between the senior cabinet positions. There was not clarity about the differences between an associate SUP's role and an assistant superintendent's role, but again, I understand that some of those job descriptions are being looked at already. And another recommendation here in this area was to consider assigning all the assistant superintendent positions to the certificated salary schedule so that you could address some work year parity. The positive news is that you have existing board policies, one in particular, 4351, with language on employee compensation. So this policy could also be updated to include things like Y rating, initial step placement, and application of the career increment credit. So, which by the way is a great incentive that your district has to cast a wide net on diversity in hiring. So for finding 3, this finding focused on the district's decentralized hiring practices across sites and departments. And as a former principal, I so appreciated having the autonomy to hire the teaching staff and support staff I wanted, and there's a great benefit in this. But recommendations also suggest that some new universal protocols are in order so that there is consistency and equity in posting vacancies, applicant screening, selection, and background checking. And those should all be overseen basically by your human resource department, and then giving some defined autonomy to principals and hiring managers that they still can go out and find the most qualified candidates for their team. These guardrails will address also the board's governance team commitment that Cheryl mentioned at the beginning, which is to design and implement structures and systems that achieve equity in hiring. And so another area that I was also asked to examine was the proportionality of workforce demographics. So finding 4 reflects the ratios between students and teachers by African American, Asian, and Hispanic subgroups. And this data in the first 3 bullets comes from Forecast 5, which is a data warehousing portal that pulls information from the California Department of Education website, which your district uploads into the California Department of Ed website. This is from 2019. There has not been current data in the CDE website because of COVID. The last bullet reflects 20, 21, 22 percentages of all certificated non-management employees staff that was provided by the HR department. So you can just see that proportionality here. And of course, if we look at classified staff, it would be a little bit different ratio. And then finally, finding 5 addresses the initiatives and the incentives that the district currently has in place to recruit a diverse workforce and support upward mobility for your existing employees. And your board policy provides an exceptional recruitment incentive, one of the best that I've seen in any policy that allows the district to provide incentives to recruit teachers, administrators, and other employees to the district that will help with diversity and make sure that you're getting people casting a wide net in that. It's unclear from talking to staff how widely used that policy has been, but at least it's there. So kudos to the board for having that policy in place. And then you also have a standout developing our own program. Kudos to Bonnie Hansen. This program has supported 27 classified employees to complete their teaching credentials and 7 teachers who are earning their administrative credentials. And according to Ms. Hansen, the majority of the participants in both programs are employees of color. And lastly, in this finding, there does not appear to be a career ladder from the principalship into director positions because your high school principals earn more than directors, but overall the programs in place to recruit diverse candidates from within are very strong. So now I'm going to turn things back over to Cheryl, and she's going to discuss the key findings and recommendations from the schools and schedules review.
Thank you, Suzette. And as a reminder, the schools and schedules assessment included a review of site master schedules, the district course of study, site single plans for student achievement, the district LCAP, the superintendent's entry plan, California dashboard metrics, policies, procedures, and stakeholder interviews, to name a few. So the first finding in this area is that there is a need to define how a shift to higher expectations through the adoption of a UCA to G graduation standard will be accompanied by appropriate tier 1 access and support for all. So there is evidence that conversations about UCA to G alignment are happening with stakeholder groups across your district, and evidence that sites have already adopted UCA to G as a standard are present in some of your master schedules. If the district were to decide to adopt a system-wide graduation standard that align to UCA to G entry requirements, there are several opportunities for processes within the system to support this shift. The most important being that all diploma-bound students have access to tier 1 coursework taught by a single subject credentialed subject area teacher in combination with appropriate tier 1 connected supports to ensure first-time mastery. That's a mouthful, but basically these supports should be not instead of access to tier 1, but in addition to. So where do you begin? First, graduation requirements would need to be revised. An example would be you would include 3 years of math rather than 2 as your graduation standard. In addition, a district graduation procedure should be created to provide implementation parameters to sites to ensure that a guaranteed experience is consistent across sites. Why is this important? Because sometimes perceptions about what kids are capable of or not capable of dictate course placement or course access. For example, if I'm not good at math, I might not get in physics. And that's not the case in your schools in most cases, but there isn't consistency across schools in some cases as to which course is aligned at which grade level. Sometimes they're options and you have to watch variance to see who gets in and who gets out. I recommend that you examine the role that placement exams are playing in your district. They should be examined to ensure that they provide guidance for additional tier 1 support rather than gatekeeping tier 1 access and or creating tracks. An example of this would be your 9th grade ELA coursework, how kids get in, and some of those courses are not in the 9th grade graduation eligible. There is also evidence of significant ability tracking in the master schedules. This is by course. And I would do a further examination of that tracking by student group. Clear guidelines need to be established to clarify system expectations versus school site discretion. And one thing that is a major strength in your district is your professional learning. I think an opportunity would be to make sure that processes are in place at sites to move from not just receiving PD, but to actually monitoring those instructional shifts once the teachers get back from the PD. And that happens in different ways at different sites. And finally, given the fact that you're a high school district that receives students from many feeder districts, you might consider convening monthly meetings with your feeders to start aligning your pathway efforts so that the expectations coming from different directions start to align more when they come into your system. Finding 2 is that there's a need to translate district policy and resolutions around equity into actionable implementation steps. So there is clear evidence that the district has a clear resolution and governance team goals as it pertains to equity. The translation of those expectations into clear procedures that support sites to build shared belief systems and messaging about equity to their unique communities is the clear opportunity for a next step in equity. This will require that conversations between multiple stakeholders take place about loose and tight relationships around site autonomy when it comes to equity. These conversations should lead to the creation or revision of procedures, practices, and processes that reinforce what will be tight, which is expected systemically, and loose, what the site has leeway to decide. The principals need to be able to refer to clear procedures if they are expected to implement changes that may initially cause concerns within their communities. Finding 3 is that there is a need to integrate the efforts of central office divisions and departments to provide instructional coherence. So I already mentioned that your professional learning department is doing not only an outstanding job, but everyone that I interviewed mentioned it as the #1 thing that Sequoia had that they were doing well and that they were really proud of. I do think, though, that at the central level, you need to eliminate silos within the system. An example would be that a positive step was taken by separating student services from human resources, as was previously mentioned. However, the counselors and MTSS support staff are in student services, but graduation and professional learning are in ed services. There need to be formal processes, and I know that the leaders of those divisions are already putting some in place for meaningful collaboration between those divisions to make sure that those efforts are integrated and not operating in silos. I also think that given the strong stance that your professional learning division has taken around the clear instructional shifts that are expected in your district, there should be more alignment between special education English learners at the English learner division and the general education division around those instructional shifts. So they're all speaking the same language and they're all, for the most part, heading diploma-bound kids towards a meaningful graduation. The clear and coherent instructional shifts driving your curriculum and instruction division should be the through line for all. And I would make a clear connection between what teachers are learning and what administrators are coaching, and use that professional learning division to be supportive in making that connection between the teachers and the principals and the types of professional learning they receive. Finding 4 is that there is a need to develop a data culture to respond to significant gaps in student achievement by student group. There is evidence that there are many useful data reports on the district website, and the overall achievement data in Sequoia is positive. The equity work, I believe, for your district is in the achievement gaps between student groups like the Hispanic, special education, and English learner groups versus the performance of your white and Asian subgroups. I would consider making sure that the human and fiscal resources at the site level are aligned to clear goals with ongoing monitoring, not just talking about how you're going to assess, but how does that lay down on a calendar, and what are you going to do if things aren't moving in the direction that you want them to in real time. And reflection of those priorities should be seen in the master schedule across the board, in the SIPSAs and the LCAP. Principals also need to be able to access more than summative data. A discussion about ongoing formative data that is actionable should take place. I would also look at grading trends over multiple years by site, course, and student group, and possibly trace one graduation class from K-12 to look at trends in regards to which subgroups graduate on time, which subgroups transfer to alternative sites, who meets A to G and who doesn't, who's coming to school and who isn't, and look at it all through the student group lens to understand the health of the system overall. And finally, my fifth finding is there's a need to acknowledge and address the trauma that many central office and site staff experienced over the last 4 years. This finding was actually the direct result of trends that I heard in stakeholder interviews. Many stakeholders shared and/or acknowledged that the last 4 years in Sequoia Union felt like a system of chaos due to a lack of decision-making, loose structures, and incoherence, resulting in a feeling of trauma and compromised relational trust between divisions and between central office and the ground. The only purpose for sharing this information as a finding is that it will be important for district leadership to acknowledge this perspective, seek to understand its root causes, and respond in a way that allows for the system to heal. So this concludes our prepared remarks, and I will hand things back over to Dr. Williams and the board.
Thank you, Ms. Hiblen and team for that presentation and the share out of the preliminary findings and recommendations from the report. We will have an additional information regarding finance at another time, and then also a comprehensive final report will be provided to the board at a later date.
Are there any questions or comments from the board? Actually, Edith has a comment.
You know, before they do, Carrie, would it be fair for the students who are still here to let them know that we're several items away from bond, if that's why they were staying around, and that some of us, no action on the bond resolution will be taken today, and either individually or with a couple of board members, we could follow up with them to let them know about the
Okay.
our
If you guys
conversation
wanted to stay
today.
for the bond, that is probably going to be a while. It's up to you. You're welcome to stay, but you don't have to stay.
And we're also available on Zoom from the comfort of your home.
I think I'm going to go ahead and call on, is it okay if I call on, it's up to me as president, I can do whatever I want. I'm going to call on Edith.
I wanted to thank the presenters for this. I would be eager to read the full report if that's going to be made available to members of the public. I had a good hour-long conversation with Cheryl about my perspectives as a stakeholder. And I see that many of those topics made it into the presentation. I am encouraged that the district has embarked on this in having an outside lens brought in to look at these issues. I'm encouraged to see that some of the frustrations that I have brought to the board meetings over the last 2 to 3 months about the seeming popcorn nature of new positions being made available is reinforced in some of these findings. And so I really wish that we would have been able to get this report sooner so that job descriptions could be reviewed and revised and aligned before we set about creating hundreds of thousands of dollars of new positions that may ultimately not serve our students as much as better aligning the work that we are already doing and already paying for. I agree that professional development and professional learning is a huge strength in our district. And I agree that there needs to be unified support of implementation of those strategies in the classroom. We have gotten much better as a district over the last decade and a half of matching what administrators are looking for in evaluations to what we are teaching teachers to do in their classrooms, but we can always get better at that and get on the same page with the same vocabulary. I was taken aback when I previewed the presentation by the first systems and schedules recommendation, because I have not been part of any conversation that would suggest that the district was anywhere near considering aligning graduation requirements to the UCA through G requirements, and in fact have been part of many conversations where educators have pushed back against the UCA through G being used as the sort of standard for student achievement. There are many colleges available, many post-secondary options available if you do not complete your UCA through G. And beyond the steps and student supports, et cetera, that Cheryl mentioned, a shift that drastic would also have potentially overwhelming staffing impacts because it would change fundamentally which classes students had to take and which classes students were then available and able to take from amongst our electives. And so I think it's important for the board and the district and site administration to be very clear about where we are as a district or where we are not as a district in terms of seeing that as a goal, because that as a goal will be it will ring alarm bells for every electives teacher in our district that their job is on the line, because we need to create more sections of science, of math, and of world language. And so while I appreciate all the context that was given to it, that context isn't in the presentation, and there's only 28 people here in this meeting. So I really want to emphasize to the district leadership and to the board that we need to be careful when we talk about things like that. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments, Edith. Actually, I appreciate your comments. I'm going to go ahead and go first. I had the same reaction to the A through G graduation requirements. So I think in our push for equity, what I think about is the kids that need the most help. And when you think about the kids that need the most help, they're often not attending school. They're disengaged from their learning. Many of them, their life circumstances. And I have spent so much time talking to teachers who work, intently with that group of kids. And some of our teachers will say, and I learn the most from our teachers because they're with our kids every day, and they will say, because we do have a focus right now on A through G completion. It may not be a graduation requirement, but it is a focus. And our teachers believe, many of them believe it is a focus. And so many teachers have said to me that push for A through G is actually damaging for some of our kids. And I believe that is true. So I think we need to carefully consider that. I love your recommendation of, talking to kids. This is one of the things I've always wanted to do. Just take the kids that end up at Redwood or Continuation High School, interview every one of them. And it's those stories that will tell us what we need to do. And I'll tell you, it's not one more year of math. That is not in what they will tell us. I can just guarantee it. So thank you, Edith, for your comments. I completely agree with what you said. Other comments and questions, Chris?
I think I'll begin with Edith, SDTA President's opening comment, which is she's encouraged that the district has embarked upon this work. I wholeheartedly agree with that. If we accept a line that's in the bond, right at the start of the bond resolution, it talks about the district that is committed to equipping every student with the knowledge, skills, character, and well-being to thrive in an evolving world. To do that, really to do that effectively, we need a report like this that raises important questions for us to discuss. On the A through G thing, to me, this is not the place where we have a deliberation about that issue. I understand our board president believes one thing, I believe a different thing. There are probably 5 different beliefs on this board, but one of the good things this report does, it raises important questions that we should deliberate on. I guess my hope is overall with the document, there's a lot in it that is administrative regulation. and that the superintendent might act on her own on much of it and just report to us about the changes. And then there are policy questions that should be that are rightfully brought forward to us. And then there's sort of this third category of values that drive the district. And the values discussion, I think, will need some sort of retreat study session for us to be engaged in the conversation, to react with, share our personal beliefs, but also to bring in evidence that back up those beliefs. And so in that way, I think this report is marvelous for us, even though it may raise questions about the directions we want to go. So
Okay,
thank
thank you.
you.
And then Shanice, so remember, look out in the Zoom world.
I'm
Shanice,
here. I'm here.
you're there. You're there.
First of all, thank you for the report. I think I'm going to take a step back and not be a board member for a minute and think like a parent and what I experienced as a parent.
Shanice, we're having trouble hearing you. Can you
Okay,
move
can you hear
close
me
to your
now?
computer? And you're
Can
going to have to speak up. We want
Can
to
you
hear
hear me
every word you're
now?
saying.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, so keep your voice up.
Okay, it's got to keep my microphone at my mouth. But anyhow, I'm going to take a step back to 7 years ago when I became a parent of this district, and the concerns coming into the district were particularly around not necessarily A through G, but are we getting our kids to college, right? And particularly kids who are coming out of my community or the areas that like North Fair Oaks and Bellhaven, that was kind of the group I hang out with. And so when I hear the A through G, I'm not for sure if we should line it through graduation rates. I think we need to look at our population because everybody needs a different path. But what I am thinking about through an equity process is that not all students are seen equally. So when I say that the standard of A through G is given to some, and the standard of A through G is not even offered to other individuals. And so there is a difference, right? And so the expectations for certain students is lower. There's a belief issue, right? It's more of a belief that comes out in action, right? So when I think of that A through G, it's just good education, right? It gives you options of what you want after high school. If you A through G, you go through career, that means you're prepared. If you go through A through G and you decide to go to a 2-year or 4-year, go to the Army, you're prepared, right? And so I'm wondering about this particular recommendation. Are we really offering individuals their options versus assuming what track they're in? And I hate to use the word track, but that's the only word I can think of right now. So when I hear that, that's what I hear. I don't know if there should be a complete shift because I know that we did have some students, particularly during the pandemic, we made some changes to graduation that was more in line with the state that allow some of our students who were really struggling, right? And to just finish. They were just tired of school after the pandemic, right? And so they needed to see the light at the end of the tunnel. That doesn't mean they got less of an education. It means that their path to where they want to go may be different. It may be career, it may be 2-year college, it may be 5th year of high school, whatever it is, right? So I get that. So I do believe in personalization. I believe in having options for students based off their personal needs. Carrie, or Trustee President Dubois, like I believe in that because I do think there are some students whose life gets in the way, and I don't want to lower the other standards. So how do we keep? I love how you said it's like, how do we make sure that the tier 1 access, the instructional piece, that they get the support to be in those classes if they want to, right? Or that placement tests aren't used to put you on a certain track, but placement tests are used to say, what supports do you need in that classroom? And not take away the choice of going to college because we don't believe you should be in that that particular A through G. And that's more philosophical. I don't know how we monitor that. The other thing that I thought was interesting to me, I'm looking for it, the career ladder from principal to director. The principal makes more, and thank God that we love our principals. They got so much going on, but different than the directors, right? So like, no wonder people don't want to move up, right? I still remember a principal said, we said, you want to go to central office? She said, oh, heck no. Like, because she had the salary package, right? And so we need to think about that if we want to have upward mobility of people going through this developing your own. We do need a career ladder for some of our staff, so that the ones who are principals can then, you know, bring their knowledge to the district office and help us grow. And then we have new folks coming in who can do things, you know, differently or you know, and take the baton. So I think there's something there that I would like to explore. And then there was something else that you said, I'm looking for it right now, that I thought was interesting. Around shared beliefs and frameworks. I think that that is really important for us to do. I think a lot of the other things we are trying to do, so it wasn't a shock. And I think the interesting thing that still stands out to me is that the number of gaps we have between Latino children, children who are Latino, and to the staff and particularly the teachers. I still think that is a huge concern. I love the Grow Your Own program. I think that is just a different path. And so I know, I think this gives us information. We need to be strategic, not close off anyone else, but really be strategic in our recruitment as well as from our staff. But also I think there's an opportunity, if we do well by our kids, they're going to come back and teach, right? So like if we're doing our jobs, we're getting them academically ready, they're going to be able to teach other kids and come back with their own credential. So I think there is some creativeness around what to do around that, even preparing some of our students who are interested in teaching. How do we help them begin the exploration long before they leave high school? So thank you.
Thank you, Shanice. Ellen?
I think my overwhelming sense at the presentation is be careful what you wish for, you may get it. This is really a reflection of seriously moving forward to try and get beyond the wording and get into the nuts and bolts of what equity means in our district at both a policy and at an operational level. And what comes back is a very mixed bag of results. There are many things called out in the presentation that you just made that resonates with me of, I feel very positively about the work that is underway in this area, that we have long prioritized getting progress in areas where we have seen issues and have concerns, and much has been done, particularly over this past year, to really address it strongly. The way that our district office org structure has been examined and changes that have been made, the way we have defined much more clear roles and structures and responsibilities and put new positions in place, the way in which we are reviewing our job descriptions across the board, but in an organized, prioritized manner, and really clarifying many things. The ways in which we are looking at not only recruiting and retaining our employees, but really helping them to advance and become as effective as possible. The steps that are being taken in those directions. But there are also many areas here that we look at and we say, boy, have we got some work on our plate. And some of it is at a policy discussion level, where we do need to come back as a board and look at many of these issues and really have some of those deep conversations and really be strongly informed by our stakeholders and the professionals on our staff. There are other areas, as Trustee Thompson pointed out, where there is actionable, useful operational direction contained here that our superintendent and staff can really begin making progress on and keep the board posted as we go forward. But what it really does mean is that we have a much more actionable road ahead to really get traction on the ground on these areas of equity and student outcomes that are critical to all of us. So I'm deeply appreciative of this kind of feedback. I look forward to the full report and not only the amount of reading and learning that is going to be there, but the great ongoing reference that will be there for us to come back and make real a lot of this. Thank you.
Okay, I think that's all of the comments. Thank you very much. We'll move on to the next item and then we may take a break after that. We are now on item 12.3, presentation on the district climate study.
Thank you, Madam President. In the conversation around equity this year, just to know, as part of my entry plan as the new superintendent, is actually to bring reports forward to look at where we are as equity, in terms of equity. One of the questions that I presented in my entry plan was, how ready are we for equity? And in order to do that, it's going to require us to step back and to reflect on where we are in terms of our practices and where are we in terms of our actions and our commitment to all children. And so part of that, in addition to the audit that was conducted by Illuminated, we also have been working and moving forward with a climate study and also professional development for our executive teams with the USC Race and Equity Center. This evening, the center will present key updates from its district climate study work and the Racial Equity Academies. We have Dr. Kendrick Davis, Chief Research Officer, who will highlight actions taken and progress made in phase 1 of the district's climate study. We also have Dr. John Pascarella, Chief Academic Officer, and Dr. Erica Silva, Associate Director, who will present actions, progress, and learning outcomes from the Racial Equity Leadership Academy series for our district executive team and the Racial Equity Academy series for all district employees. So it is my pleasure to introduce Dr. Pascarella, Dr. Davis, and Dr. Silva. Turn it over. Thank you for being with us.
Good evening, Dr. Superintendent Dr. Darnice Williams. Good evening to the Sequoia Union Board of Trustees and members of the Sequoia District community present this evening. My name is John Pascarella. I'm the Chief Academic Officer, as Dr. Williams introduced us. I'm here at the USC Race and Equity Center, and I'm a professor in the Rossier School of Education here at USC. And as Dr. Williams mentioned, I'm joined here this evening by my colleagues, Dr. Kendrick Davis and Dr. Erica Silva. Dr. Davis is the Chief Research Officer at the center, and he's also Associate Professor of Research. Prior to joining USC, Dr. Davis served as the Vice President for Policy Research at the Campaign for College Community. He leads 2 national projects aimed at improving racial equity in STEM departments and state policy positions related to post-secondary education. And he and his team lead the district climate study for Sequoia Union. Dr. Silva is the Associate Director of K-12 Professional Learning Programs at our center, and she is also an adjunct professor of education. Prior to joining USC, Dr. Silva worked in both public and charter school systems in Southern California as an elementary, middle school teacher, instructional specialist, and instructional coach. I'm going to share my slides just now. And as I do, you'll see in our title, as the title suggests, our mission at the USC Race and Equity Center is to eliminate, disrupt, dismantle racism in all its form. And we do this at our center through rigorous interdisciplinary research, high quality professional learning experiences, to production and wide dissemination of useful tools, trustworthy consultations, strategic advising, and substantial partnerships. Tonight, we present a progress report on 3 major district initiatives advancing equity that began in January 2022 and will continue through June 2023. Our first report will provide updates on the district climate study from Dr. Davis. Without further ado, Dr. Davis.
Thank you, Dr. Pascarello. I appreciate it. Good evening to everyone, Superintendent Williams, President Dubois, other trustees. Thank you so much for the opportunity to be here and present. Not so much, I want to be clear, not the findings, but our major sort of action steps and what you can expect from our climate study. And then Dr. Pascarello and Silva will talk about what you can expect from the professional learning series moving forward. And so one of the things, before I dive into the major action steps and things, one of the things I hope that comes across clearly is that the climate study work is complementary to the other equity activities happening in the district, and that we are working in concert to prevent a coherent and cohesive picture, as opposed to sort of like one-off ideas of how equity is operationalized and working in the district. So I first want to start, thank you, John. Use the next slide. So I first want to just start by giving an overview of just the 3 major steps that are part of our process. One is the phase 1 is our strategic advising, and really that's our opportunity to really get goal oriented with the Sequoia Union leadership, as well as those who were leaders in the Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion Committee. And the goal of that is to make sure that we're not coming in with our sort of own agenda, that every part of the climate study process is centered around what the goals and vision and mission of Sequoia District is. That's also an opportunity for us to look at other documents, other instruments, things that are used to understand the student, teacher, paraprofessional, and other experience happening across Sequoia. Phase 2 is a process we began toward the spring and toward the end of the school year that will continue into the fall. We completed the quantitative assessment that really, and I'll go into detail about each of go into more detail about each of these. We completed the quantitative assessment that helped us give us some direction on where to go. And we're currently in the phase of the qualitative assessment, which really involves a series of focus groups with priorities, student subgroups across all of the Sequoia Union High School districts. In phase 3, just so that you're aware of, which we won't go into too much detail about tonight, is, and I heard appreciating the opportunity to see and hear others present. Phase 3 is where we will start putting some of those ideas into practice and go beyond sort of the definition and concept of equity to how it's going to be operationalized, not just in the district, but in the individual school communities. Next slide, please. So for strategic advising, some of the major activities that were part of this phase is really the foundation and setting of racial equity goals and indicators, working with the board resolution and sort of those equity concepts, and looking at what is the leadership understanding of these goals? How has this been, how have these ideas been discussed in the Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion Committee? Really just trying to understand what are the larger goals we want to point to. And one of the things that was clear from that was that academic success and performance is certainly a goal and priority, that the social, emotional, and development, particularly in these COVID remote environments where we sometimes know even less about what's happening in the day-to-day lives of students and teachers. What are the social, emotional supports and experiences and around mental health? When I say operational coherence, that's really around how are we making sure these equity, the different equity strategies and projects are working together and not in silos. And then certainly want to understand what are the specific impacts of racial incidences, some that have, what are the specific impact of racial incidences that have been experienced across the district. The content review of development archival documents, again, just a place for us to make sure that we're launching from a common setting point. And then an audit of, and I mentioned some of these before, an audit of existing survey instruments, quantitative data, it's the LCAP survey, that's also reviewing the LCAP, again, to make sure our activities, our methods, our strategies are in line with the goals, visions, and missions. Next slide, please. When we move into phase two, so phase two is both our quantitative assessment, looking at the sort of numerical data to give us direction, and also a qualitative assessment, which really helps to fill those gaps in what the data are not telling us about the student, teacher, and other stakeholder experiences. So we developed a list of quantitative indicators that were largely driven by, again, those bucket areas are A through G will certainly come up in that. Social and emotional learning, what are the rates of chronic absenteeism, and how do they compare to how the state is performing? But more importantly, the crux of this is how are different district stakeholders experiencing their learning environment, their work environment, and how does that impact how they show up in programs, how they implement or don't implement policies, and essentially what those attitudes and perspectives are across a range of issues. And our, you can go to the next slide, please. The analysis section, and I'm not going to go, you don't have to go back. I'm not going to go one to one. I know these are in your board materials, so I just want to get the broad strokes. Our qualitative focus groups are really, and I think it might have been President Dubois or another board member that talked about understanding the perspective of students. Really starting from in some ways an end user experience. If all of these system structures, policies, and programs are set up to create the best sort of student experience, how are students actually experiencing it? And it's almost, there are a lot, not just Sequoia Union School District, but there are no sort of statewide. We do work with schools and districts across the country in different contexts. We don't currently have data systems set up to really have that sort of formative and ongoing monitoring and reporting of student information and where they are. And so hopefully the climate study, the focus groups, as we continue them in the fall, we started with students and we'll continue them. But we also hope to talk to teachers and paraprofessionals to bring out and understand some of those dynamics that were brought up in the former presentation. We'd hope to talk to board members if you are open and willing to do that, to really present as holistic and coherent a picture as possible. And we asked a range of questions. Those question types are at the bottom of your screen. What are the impacts of COVID? How are your relationships with faculty and staff, impact of racially motivated events? How are you experiencing and how have your attitudes changed about your learning environment between now and this time last year? Those are the different types of questions we ask. And next slide. And then finally, there's one more after this, but next steps for climate study, again, we're going to continue the qualitative data collection in the fall and continue our focus groups at schools across the Sequoia Union District, as well as with staff and other key stakeholders. We're also going to do some definitional work. I want to just point this out because one of the important things as we move from just taking these things from paper to implementing it into what's going to actually happen and work and what's feasible in the district is making sure that there's a facilitated but organic formation of a definition. And that's important for a couple of reasons. Sort of these top-down directives really fall apart because they're not properly and reasonably incentivized, and people feel like they're not a part of buying into the process. And so in the fall, and particularly in the early fall, we're really going to work to pull all these things together and offer some kind of definitional definition of equity or concept, or something that is can be mutually bought into that can serve as guiding principles moving forward for professional learning, for the racial equity strategic projects, and other district priorities. Then, of course, want to let you all know, it's a perfect segue as I pass it to our Dr. Silva and Dr. Pascarella. We do have, the professional learning and climate study activities run separately, but again, they're about the same district, and so we make sure that we coordinate and share information where relevant and where appropriate. Next slide, I think it's the timeline. I will won't run through the timeline, but there's a snapshot of where our work has started. We're anticipating it going, of course, with flexibility and adaptability in between. But that is the broad strokes of the climate study, and willing and able to answer any questions after my colleague's presentation, or to provide any further information afterwards. So Dr. Pascarella, take it away.
Thanks, Dr. Davis. And thanks again to the board as we present in the next section our discussion of 2 Racial Equity Academy series, one for the entire district for all staff, non-certificated and faculty certificated administrators attending our Racial Equity Academy district-wide series, as well as the Racial Equity Leadership Academy series that we've led since January with the Sequoia Union High School District Executive Team. Our academies are built around offering credible, accessible, and actionable racial equity strategies. All of our expert facilitators use contemporary cases of racial problems in urban K-12 schools. Emphasis is placed on, in each one of these sessions, learning from equity gains and racial missteps that have recently occurred elsewhere, learning how to get ahead of situations and reducing the risk of crisis, and learning actionable racial equity leadership strategies. Each one of these sessions are led by nationally known experts in specific areas of racial equity that they have conducted extensive research and published and presented and worked in partnership with K-12 schools just like yours. And so for the Racial Equity Leadership Academy series that we've run for your executive team, our first session was held on February 8th with Dr. Mark Anthony Gooden from the Columbia University. He spoke and addressed recovering from racial inequities produced during COVID-19. And then on March 8th, we were joined by Dr. Travis Bristol from Berkeley, who presented Understanding the Manifestations and Effects of Anti-Blackness in the Education Workplace. And for those of you who were present at that session, you learned that Dr. Bristol was in fact a former teacher in Sequoia, as well as had children who attended Sequoia. And then more recently, on April 12th, we were joined by Dr. Maisha Wynn, who is a renowned expert in restorative justice and looking at disproportionality in school discipline, racial disproportionality in school discipline. And she presented and discussed her work focused on eliminating disproportionality in school discipline in Sequoia. And in fall and leading into this next spring, we have 3 more sessions lined up in the series, addressing explicit acts of racism in schools, recruiting, supporting, and retaining teachers and staff and members of color, as well as cultivating relationships with families and communities of color. And with that, Dr. Silva is going to present on the reactions, responses to the session so far.
Thank you so much, Dr. Pascarella. Good evening, Superintendent Williams and members of the board, community members. It's my pleasure to be sharing some of the data that has come out of our exit surveys from our professional learning series with the executive team. And so in our first session with Dr. Mark Anthony Gooden, this was focused on recovering from racial inequities produced during COVID-19. Our respondents were able to share with us the usefulness of this Racial Equity Academy session. And as you can see, 100% of participants showed that it was very useful or most useful, the information that they were able to learn. Again, this is the data that's coming from the respondents to our exit survey. And one of the comments that a participant put forth in the exit survey, they shared that they appreciated the format of the session and the opportunity to have honest conversations about systemic issues and equity in our schools and districts in Sequoia. For the session 2, again, you see a high rate of respondents to the exit survey show that, again, they found it very useful or most useful. And again, this was a session with Dr. Travis Bristol, who really was able to dig deep around the manifestations of systemic racism and really help leaders begin to think about the ways that this can emerge within school communities. And in this session in particular, one of the respondents shared that they were grateful that we were able to anchor the session in personal stories, videos of concrete steps and application. And this quote was particularly stood out to me was they thanked the presenter for providing hope that progress is possible. And again, the goal of our professional learning series with both the executive team and the greater district community is to really help leaders and your school communities begin to think about how you can advance racial equity within your community by discussing the challenges, but also beginning to plan how we can use those challenges to overcome and create next steps using data from the climate study and the multitude of resources that Dr. Williams has put forth to advance equity in the Sequoia Union High School District. And for our last session this past April with Dr. Maisha Wynn, again here, the respondents from the survey again rated this was a very useful or most useful. And so as we look to the fall, we will be using the climate study to inform the way that we are conducting our professional learning series, begin to think about how we might change and adapt based on the feedback that we continue to receive from participants within the district, and really continue to work with the executive team and the district-wide series to ensure that the professional learning goals are being met for our Racial Equity Academy initiative in the Sequoia Union High School District.
Thank you, Dr. Silva. And as we continue with our district-wide series that began on January 31st with our very own Dr. Sean Harper, who's the founder and executive director of our center, who led a session on engaging in productive conversations about race and racism. This series will continue in September, March, April of next academic year, and then into the following year in September and November of 2023. As you can see, the titles that are lined up there, we will continue to be working with nationally known experts in each of these areas to engage the entire district. In addition to our Racial Equity Academy for the district-wide series, we have led additional initiatives with your executive team. After each session led by a nationally known expert, we work in an equity leadership lab approach to working with our executives to debrief the sessions and determine the ways in which equity can be advanced and sustained through the leadership decisions and members of the executive team. That also involves deeper discussions of the racial equity challenges, themes, resources, practical strategies that were introduced in the series. In addition to that, we've led specific professional learning sessions for Tide Academy and Redwood High School faculty, staff, and leadership at the request of those two school leaders. And it was wonderful to work more intimately with those school teams. In addition to that, our sessions absolutely center this focus on building racial literacy and challenging intersectional racism in the work with students. And so as we conclude our presentation, we want to present to you what we see as a strategic continuum of engagement to advance racial equity in the district. And we see, as Dr. Davis mentioned earlier, all three efforts working simultaneously to advance the equity work in your school district. The Racial Equity Academies, as explained, and updates provided, the district climate study, as Dr. Davis outlined and illustrated, updates, and how, as Dr. Silva pointed out, we will use these report findings to continuously inform the Racial Equity Academy work we're doing in the professional learning experiences, as well as the racial equity projects as we form project teams in response to the racial equity challenge or opportunities outlined in those reports, and continue to support those project teams as they attempt to take up those challenges and opportunities in your respective schools. And then just one more slide with those timelines so you can see how these phases all line up together and in sync with Dr. Davis's earlier timeline side. So thank you so much for your time, and we absolutely welcome any questions you have on any of these three initiatives. Thank you so much again.
Thank you for the presentation. Very exciting work. Any comments or questions? Anybody? Chris?
A simple question of our superintendent really is how many people do we have engaged in the academies and by position, essentially, who's going?
So in terms of our academies, what we started with our executive, senior executive cabinet members. And so that includes all of our directors, our coordinators and specialists, and folk who work in district offices, and our principals as well. We have had one session, which included the entire district. And so when we negotiated the 5 professional development days, those days will be used for our district-wide trainings. And so that will encompass every staff member within the district. So to date, we have about 69 people in our academies.
Just one other question. This might be of the team. I think what we saw here was the approach, the methodology of the climate study. Is there a plan for presenting findings from the climate study to the board?
Yes, we will report the findings, and as Dr. Davis mentioned, this work is all aligned. So the work from the Lumined consultants as well as with USC, it is all going to be coordinated, and then the findings will be presented together. And so you'll get a midterm report around October. That is when we're planning to discuss the definition, because we started off this work with wanting to understand what is our operational definition of equity. One is, are we ready? So our readiness, and where are we? And what good work are we doing? What can we build on? And then what do we need to do? And then the other is about how do we operationalize equity and lead and function on a daily basis from an equity lens. And in order to do that, we wanted to make sure that we had feedback from all stakeholders so that we can develop a district-wide definition that's going to continue to guide our work. So that is going to come to the board and to the public in October.
Thank you. I'm very grateful for this work.
Janice?
Thank you for the presentation. That was very helpful. I was wondering though, about what is the board's interaction with this? Like, I know that it's just presentation, but are you going to interview the board members? I'm starting to sound like Carrie. Sometimes I feel a little left out. Can I still give input, or like, what is that? What does that look like as a stakeholder?
Thank
Dr.
you for
Nuzzi,
the
want me to take that
question,
question?
Trustee. Oh, okay. Thank you for the question, Trustee. Yes, Stevenson. The board members will be involved in this process, this next phase. They will be interviewed, or you all will be, or all of you will be interviewed, and your input and also your perspective will be included in the report. Dr. Davis, you were going to add something.
No, that was perfect. I didn't know if you wanted me to jump in. That's perfect.
Okay. So you want to just underscore what we discussed about having board members?
Absolutely. And hopefully what came across was that we're beginning, or the sort of qualitative part of filling those gaps of, all right, we understand the data, we know the policies and procedures, but how are stakeholders in the district experiencing that? So we very much want to continue that conversation in the fall and include the board members in that as well.
So are you going to do any assessment of, you know, when I think about readiness for equity, there's different levels, right? And I know you're getting stakeholder input, but how are you assessing board readiness, you know, community readiness? I think students are already there. They're already talking about it. It's the adults around them that need to talk about it. So I'm just wondering, how do we actually assess people's readiness, not just to talk about it, but readiness for change?
I'll go first. So Trustee Stevenson, again, thank you for the question. We have started the readiness, and the assessment or appraisal of readiness comes with the feedback in terms of where we, from each of the audits. And then also it comes into the recommendations, and knowing that these recommendations and the findings, which are supported by artifacts, these are choices that we get to make as a district. So when a finding is presented, it is just that. It is a finding based on research or based on qualitative measures that have been instituted. And then that's when we as a district come together and we have to do an appraisal of this information and say, can our system withstand moving forward and making steps to push forward equity? So let me give you an example. So in the last presentation, when one of the recommendations brought forth was about A through G, doesn't mean that we were going to change the whole system and blow it up and say, oh, wow, we're going to require A through G as a graduation requirement. It gets to the point that you raised. It's going to require us to determine, are we treating all of our students fairly? Are we providing them with the same level of access to a robust educational program that will provide them for college access or for career success post-secondary? And so when you're asking the how, we're in the thick of the how. The how is collecting the data, identifying trends, having conversations, presenting the information publicly to all of our stakeholders. And then we're going to engage in reactions, right? And reactions, sometimes when you hear reactions, sometimes it has a negative connotation, but with this, it is, are we really willing to do what it takes so that everything that we do within our district, from our governance team, the way we make decisions, are we willing to put not only equity, but children at the center? And in order to make those decisions, we have to have data. We have to also have resources. And most importantly, we have to have the willingness to make certain adjustments so that we can ensure that we are definitely doing the work of equity that is intended. And one thing I just want to remind everyone, these conversations are healthy, because once you commit to transitioning or advancing equity work within a system, it takes time and it takes patience, and it's not going to happen overnight. And so to the board and to the community, from a leadership perspective, I appreciate your patience in this work. And I also appreciate the feedback, some of which has been positive, some of which has been just a bit tentative, but nonetheless is going to continue to help us in the work that we're doing. And so when you say board readiness, is how does the board respond to the data that's presented? And then what actions do we take? Someone had the statement of, how do we take actions and or findings and to make them actions? So I look at it as a triple track. And triple track means you have a body of information, so call it findings. Then we have conversation, and it's about board direction, and it's also about superintendent. How do we do this? How do we work with our stakeholders to make sure that this information lands in spaces that is going to directly impact kids, i.e. schedules. We heard about that today. Doesn't mean that we're going to accept these recommendations, but it gives us a basis and foundation for that conversation. Hiring practices. Doesn't mean we're going to accept all of the recommendation, but again, it gives us a basis and foundation and a starting point for us to make some adjustments in our system so that we might hire and retain talent, a diverse pool of talent. And so we are in the thick of, to your point and to your question, we are in the thick of assessing readiness with all the work that we have started, we are done, and that we are doing. Dr. Kendrick, Dr. Davis, you want to?
I can only underscore what you said. I have nothing to add.
Okay, Alan?
So again, I'm going to repeat a little bit. Once again, this is a matter of being careful what you ask for, you may get it. We are here looking at the challenging, sometimes difficult, sometimes uncomfortable work of really understanding where we're starting from and trying to really plan and operationalize where we want to go to. And it means a lot of self-examination, a lot of intentionality, and then a lot of hard work. And I appreciate the roadmap you're laying out for this work. I think one of the questions I would have for the superintendent and the team here is, I do want to be sure that we're looking at every opportunity as we progress to make sure that the board is not left behind in any training opportunities. I would hate to find ourselves in a position of trying to lead as a board when a substantial majority of our staff have been exposed to concepts that we need to catch up on. I want to make sure that we have the opportunity to grow with the team and help continue to lead the team thoroughly, because Lord knows the board is not short on the need to learn and grow as everybody else in our organization is. But once again, I'm more than anything, I'm very excited to see this work going by. I like the way it's been laid out, and it's a recognition that the task is large, it's ongoing, and the time frame is going to require patience as well as commitment. So thank you for that.
Any other comments? All right. Thank you so much for the presentation. Good work. So I think we should take a break. We come back in 5 minutes. You want more? Why do they laugh at my 5-minute breaks? You want 10? Okay, 10. Okay, I'm gonna get this road back on the show. We have such a full agenda. So Shanice is back. Good. You were timing it perfectly. All right. So everybody ready? Moving on with our agenda, we are now on 12.4, presentation of data zone.
Good evening. I'm Diana Wilmot, the Director of Program Evaluation and Research. I'm introducing tonight's presentation of Data Zone. We have two presenters from the Santa Clara County Office of Education, Danya Uni, the IT Manager, and Nabil Shaheen, Director of K-12 Data Governance. We engaged in an MOU with these folks for Data Zone, which they will share about our process, and we're very proud that we're in this engagement with them and with our feeder districts, really for the focus of Goal 6, which as a governance team, you guys put together last July, which is on initiating a long-term effort to data share with K-8 districts and community college districts. So it is a valiant effort of data sharing, and we are just starting the process with them. Just from my own experience, I used to work at the Santa Clara County Office of Education. It was a decade ago when, the idea of the cloud and data warehousing was just starting. And so Data Zone has been around now for a full 10 years. And it's great to see them. They have really spread across Santa Clara County and now have moved into San Mateo County. And it's really, the inspiration of the San Mateo County Office of Education to engage with them around this effort. And without further ado, I will take this opportunity to have them come up here and tell you more.
I'm going to take off my mask. I haven't mastered this presenting with a mask on thing. So I'm Nabil Shaheen. I'm the Director of K-12 Data Governance with the Santa Clara County Office of Education. And I do want to clarify that Danya is actually from the San Mateo County Office of Education. And this is a partnership between the two county offices. And so Danya comes from the tech side of things. There's another name you see on the presentation, which is Ganesh. He's not with us tonight, but he is our Director of Data Analytics and Development at the Santa Clara County Office of Education. And we work in partnership from the tech side to the educational side. Ganesh's background and Danya's background is all in the technical stuff that I don't know how to do. My background is all in K-12 education. So I come from teaching and high school and middle school site administration. And I've been with the county office for about 3 years. So I'm going to cover very briefly, we're asked to keep it short. So I'm going to cover a few things, but I provided an extended slide deck where you'll have a little bit more information. There's some screenshots and things like that that you can look at when you have a little bit more time. But for me to go through all of it would take us deeper into the night than we already are. So our mission for Data Zone is to transform the education data culture in California by providing an integrated data warehouse platform and analytics tool that supports a student's first focus. One of the key differences for us is that we are a county office of education. So we're not a company, we're not profit driven, we don't have shareholders, we have stakeholders, but It really positions us a little differently in that we work to be responsive to districts and to county offices. And our focus is working in partnership and developing platforms and applications that serve them and serve their students, right? And it aligns with our mission as a county office to make sure that we're serving students. And that really is the bottom line for us in every situation. And so sometimes when we look at this, I sit in this weird space because it is a product that we do generate revenue from. We're never out to sell it. Our goal for every district is to make sure that we're working with them to service their students in whatever way they find that they need to. And so it's never really about sales for us. So our focus as a county office is to close the academic and achievement gaps, to be an active partner, to provide an integrated data warehouse platform and connect timely and accurate student data, and to provide all of this at cost. So all of the work we do is always at cost. So I just want to cover real quickly how the student data warehouse works. So it is a large repository of information. We currently house data for all of Santa Clara County, Napa County. We have 16 districts in San Mateo out of the 24 right now. We're in Butte County and also in Mariposa County. So we have upwards of 300,000 student records that come in every single night. The way it works is that we connect to the student information systems in every one of the districts, and we use these customized transformation scripts in order to map all the data. And then we transfer the data. So the data comes out of the student information systems with these customized scripts. It extracts that, it transforms it, and it loads it securely into the data warehouse. And once it's in the data warehouse, then we can form that data so that we can look at it across the county. We can even look at it across multiple counties. And so we use CalPads where appropriate to conform the data. And then we also generate attributes and measures so that we can use that to either cater to the analytics platform that goes back to the districts or use it for reporting, or in certain situations where we have interagency applications, then it can also be used in those interagency applications. And what you see in the diagram there is just a sampling of what we bring in to just kind of give an idea. But we bring in all student information systems, or what's called SIS agnostic. So PowerSchool, Synergy, Infinite Campus, it doesn't matter what student information system it is. We also bring in interim and benchmark assessments. So all those large ones, NWEA MAP, iReady, DIBBLES, STAR. And then we also bring in College Board assessments and any of the state assessments for LPAC and for CASP. So there's two different types of implementation. There's the student data warehouse and the student data warehouse and analytics, and they're slightly different. So the student data warehouse you see on the right side is a base level implementation. And that's currently what Sequoia is engaged in through the San Mateo County Office of Ed. So this is subsidized by the COE. So there's no cost at all to the districts when we do this, but it does have limited data available. The data we bring in is just the SIS data. We don't bring in the College Board assessments or the state assessments or the local assessments under this agreement. Under the student data warehouse and the analytics platform, when we start providing analytics for the districts, it's still subsidized by the County Office of Ed, but there is additional cost to the district. And to just give you an idea, the overall cost if a district paid for it on their own would be about $7 per student. The county office picks up $3 of that for every student, and then the district would pick up the other $4. And what that allows us to do is, on top of the data warehousing, then we provide a full set of analytics. And then we bring in the College Board assessments, all the state assessments, any local assessments, because then we're actually utilizing a Power BI base in order to provide analytics back to the district.
Or just real quick question. Is that
Yeah.
$4 and $7 per day, week, month, year?
Per year. So it's annual based on the CBEDS enrollment data. So just kind of looking back at that diagram, it just kind of gives you an idea. So when we look at all of that data that's coming into the student data warehouse, that's really under the warehouse and analytics implementation. When we look at just the data warehouse implementation, it's just the SIS data. Danya and I were just talking though especially about state data. We really want to bring in the state data. Currently, we've been talking with CDE and ETS, and there is no solution for county level extracts out of TOMS in order to bring that in. So we do still have to rely on every district to provide that. With that said, if all the districts agree to provide that data once a year, then we can easily bring that data in. We haven't done it in Santa Clara County because we just didn't have every district that was willing to provide the data on an annual basis. Diana talked about this being implemented a decade ago, and it was, and if I could go back and be a part of that, I would have really pushed for that state data to come in. So I think for San Mateo County, we really want to look at that state data coming in because we think there's a lot of value in bringing it in, and also from a data sharing perspective. So when we look at data sharing, because I know that's a big interest, again, it's slightly different depending on whether the districts that are in it are doing analytics or just in the data warehouse. So if you're just in the data warehouse, then the data is extracted from the warehouse. So we would provide a data extract because there's no front-end access to the data right now for a district. So even though your data is flowing into the data warehouse, you don't have access to that from a front end because the analytics piece isn't set up. But we can still pull an extract out from SECOE and provide that to you. And that can include data that would be coming from your partner districts or your feeder districts. It would be, however, limited to the SIS data. So it wouldn't include right now the state data or local assessment data in that. But it would include all of the demographic data, attendance, behavior, grades, everything that they hold in their student information system. It also allows for connections to interagency systems. So as San Mateo County begins to build up more interagency systems, it would allow the data to then be connected to the interagency systems. It's always done with permission from the district. So districts retain full ownership of all their data, and nothing is ever done with the data unless the district has signed off on it to be done. So it would never be shared with anybody. It would never be connected to any system unless there was an agreement with the district and the county in order to do that. There's some examples of that in the extended deck, but in SECOE, we have a couple different integrated data systems where we work with juvenile justice, we work with DFCS and SSA and behavioral health in order to have integrated systems that feed educational data from every district in the county into systems where people can utilize that. If you're in the analytics and your feeder districts are in the analytics, then you have a little bit more of an extended way to utilize the data. We can still do extracts from the warehouse. They do have a larger set of data because they can include any of the data that's coming from the state for LPAC, SBAC, as well as interim and benchmark assessments. There's also the option at that point when data sharing is in place in order to have districts be able to access other districts' instance of the analytics platform. So for example, if you had an agreement and you were in the analytics platform and so was Redwood City, then you could go in feasibly and just switch from Sequoia to Redwood City and be able to look up data on students that were incoming. You'd also be able to look up historical data on students that you currently have. And you can do that through the system, but both districts have to be within the analytics platform for that to happen. All right, I'm going to stop there because we could keep going on, but I want to be able to answer any questions that you might have because I just really wanted to focus in on how does the data warehouse work and then how does the sharing work. I'm happy to go into more depth on the analytics platform if you want, but I didn't want to spend too much time tonight doing that.
Chris, Alan?
Just a couple of quick questions
Yeah.
to start with. Are all 8 of our K through 8 partners participating at this point?
Not yet. So everybody has signed on to the DSA with the exception of San Carlos, Woodside, and Ravenswood. Woodside is in. San Carlos, Redwood City, and Ravenswood. And we're in conversations with both Redwood City and Ravenswood, and we expect them to come on this summer. I'm going to be meeting with Liz Wolf in a couple weeks, and Nancy McGee's been working with Ravenswood. San Carlos is the one we haven't really engaged much with so far. It was just we had a kind of phased implementation based on student information systems. They were at the end of those waves, so we're just starting outreach to them.
Okay.
But every other district is in.
And of the 5 that are on board so far, are any of them involved in the analytics as well?
They are not yet. So our focus was getting everybody into the data warehouse. But I will be talking with Redwood City about the analytics. I'm presenting on Friday to Belmont Redwood Shores about the analytics. And there was one more, but I don't think it was one of your feeder districts.
Okay. So kind of thinking about, I can kind of see both sides of the picture involving the analytics. One is, let's kind of get going in the data world and start getting some sharing going on with our partner districts and kind of get things going. And then you can decide to upgrade to the analytics after that. The other thought that kind of occurs to me immediately is a district might very well want to see the whole range of capability as early as possible, and then you could decide, oh, maybe for the long term for us, the analytics side isn't necessary because only this much of it looks really, really useful to us, and here's a bunch of things we want to look at that we're going to have to custom develop anyhow.
Yeah, we see that with different districts. So part of what we've really been working on, so one of the things I guess to maybe make you aware of is for a long time, for most of the decade that Diana was talking about, we were partnered with Who Knew It, which was acquired by PowerSchool. And that actually limited our ability to do a lot of things. It limited our ability to be able to actually do a subsidized model like what we're doing right now. It limited our ability to do a lot of the data sharing. And so we recently have now deployed and developed a brand new platform and a brand new data model that allows us a lot more flexibility. So what you're talking about, like we can work with districts to kind of figure that out. So, and even one of the big things that we're now working on is to provide more access to the data warehouse itself for districts if they have the SQL knowledge and things like that. There are things within the platform and the analytics that allow you to extract out certain data, and then you can bring that into whatever you want to and work with it. Because there are always going to be things that we're not going to be able to meet. There's going to be a unique metric that a district needs that won't be in the warehouse, and we know that. It's impossible for us to be able to have every metric that everybody could ever need. So really trying to build out that ability to bring all the data together and then allow you the control to bring it out and do whatever you need to with it.
And then finally, you mentioned a handful of data sources that would only be taken in if you were part of the analytics part.
Right.
And my question there is that if a district was to transition to including analytics somewhere down the road, I would assume that basically your history of that chunk of data is only going to start after that point.
Not necessarily, because we can bring in whatever data they provide us when they start. So when we bring in, like, so all of the SIS data, because there's historical data in there, all of that data comes in. We usually go 3 to 4 years back in that data. Right now, because of COVID, we're pushing back a little bit further because we really know that the last good baseline we have is 1819. But we bring in whatever historical data they provide. So if they were providing us with multi-years of CASP data, we would bring that in. If they had multiple years of local assessment data, we'd also bring that in.
So it sounds to me in general that taking our time and really coming up to speed with the data warehouse and getting fundamentally there and building out the sharing of partnership data and things like that with a certain amount of cost savings up front is probably a pretty sound approach. And then when we're ready in the fullness of time, taking advantage of the full capabilities would be completely on the table.
Yeah, absolutely. And we've been doing the data extract work with Jefferson Union High School District for a few years now. And they are in a situation where all of their feeder districts are in the analytics platform. So we provide them with a pretty large data set every year coming from their feeder districts. We're actually working right now, I've been working with Jefferson Elementary to define fields to provide data sharing and a data extract back to the elementary districts from the high school. so that they can look and see, you know, how are students that are going through different math pathways? What do their outcomes look like? You know, any students that they might have in special programs that they've really helped to try and support, because they have a vested interest in understanding how the programs that they're implementing are really resulting in downstream for their students. To be able, you know, it's hard. I can tell you, I was a middle school principal. It's really hard in 3 years to be able to figure out if the programs that you have are really having long-term sustainability, because you have the kids for such a short time. And so they're really interested in that. And so that's part of what we're also building into the platform is that ability for them to be able to go and look at students that they used to have at the high school level and be able to see how, you know, what do outcomes look like for those students.
Our articulation is a two-way street.
It is. So, and it often isn't, because we push the data up, right? And we get busy. And so really trying to work with them to make sure that we can articulate, you know, both up and down is really important.
Shawnee's.
Yes, I have two questions. One is, I'll start with the first and I'll let you answer and then answer the second one. But the first one is looking at our districts. I know that I think you said San Carlos, Redwood City, and Ravenswood are the last one to come on. And I'm wondering what questions or cautions are they having around the data analytics, and being a part of the system?
Yeah, it's a great question. Ravenswood, when I had spoken to Nancy, was purely just capacity to look at it and engage. So they just asked to wait until summer. So I don't know if they had any specific reservations. I don't know, Danya, if you know at all, or if you've been part of that conversation.
No, I think it was mainly the resources.
Okay.
I couldn't hear.
Sorry, she said mainly it was just the resources. So we're
Oh, okay.
not aware of any reservations that Ravenswood has. I've spoken to Liz Wolf in Redwood City, and same sort of thing. Her and I were engaging in April, and she just asked if we could put it off and talk a little bit more, because she wanted to talk about the analytics platform as well. And she asked if we could put it off into June until after school ended. And then San Carlos is the one we haven't really had any conversations with. So we're just going to start engaging with them. We haven't done outreach to them yet.
Okay. And maybe I'm off because I don't understand all the data information, but I'm just wondering, I'm thinking from kind of like a biased perspective, right? How can we ensure that data is not going to be used against students versus for students, like misrepresentation of data, how to use that for planning? Sometimes we look at it from a deficit perspective. So I'm just wondering about that.
No, those are great questions. I have to say, as far as SECOE, we actually don't do anything with the data other than bring it all together and conform it. So we don't utilize that data for anything. SMCOE would be working in partnership, but only on things that are agreed upon with the district. So, you know, it wouldn't be that anybody would be pulling this data and utilizing it for anything else. And we have very strict security protocols in place. So unless you have granted people access to this data, nobody will have access to it. So with SMCOE, there's only a couple people in SMCOE that would have access to it. And they are all on teams that are really working. You know, I think, Danya, you might be able to answer this better because I know it more from the elementary because of the big lift. But, you know, what sort of things might be worked on in partnership with high school districts?
Yeah, so our data and analytics team would have they will be working directly with Sequoia, and they will be pulling, and it'll be mostly for your use. If you are signing on the analytics platform, any data will be used it'll be only for your use. The data warehouse portion, that's the part that Nabil was mentioning, that there is this vision to connect the juvenile justice and these child welfare, you know, all those third-party systems will be talking. But again, as Nabil mentioned, like it will be the district who authorizes. And it's not like juvenile justice will get access to all data. It'll be specific student level permission. So there will be a district administrator who will be granting access to saying, yes, this student needs help. And, you know, you are specifically granting student level permission to those third-party agencies. So it's not like they can lurk around and see who is there and So it'll all be controlled by the district. So you will have full, full ownership, and you will have full access to determine who will see your data.
Okay, and then the last question, are families, and I guess this is more for our district staff, Dr. Wilcock, and I think it's Wilcock. I'm sorry if I'm saying your name wrong, I'm a little tired. And Dr. Williams, will families be able to opt in and opt out of giving their data into this system?
I'm not sure if that question was for me or for you. So we don't currently have a mechanism for families to opt out. It's the same data that would be in the student information system.
Okay.
It's a great question because I know one of the intents of San Mateo County is they are building out their interagency work around school threat assessment. But that utilizes a different system. It would utilize the student data warehouse as the repository for educational data, but it utilizes a different application that has an active consent structure that's built into it, right? So in order for any agency to be able to see data on a student, then the holder of that agency data, so in this case, it would be Sequoia Union High School District, would have to actually consent to that data being shared across agencies. And so it's a little bit, that system's a little bit different. And before the data is connected to that and used, there'll be separate agreements between the districts and the county in order to engage in that.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think those are the questions that I have. I think families are still going to have questions around how the data is being used and will that help or hurt my kid? And how do we ensure that it's not is used for good? Because sometimes data is not used very well. So thank you.
Okay. I just wanted to add, this is Diana Wilmot again. One of the things that they're talking about, I think that would be most valuable is the 8th to 9th grade transition, where we really lose time in terms of making this transition as smooth as possible for our freshmen coming in. So that data transfer, we spend a majority of the year really trying to track down and make sure we can track down even if it's demographics or test scores or what have you, to make sure that the students' schedules are in place. There's a lot of personnel involved in all of that, in that collection of the data. And that I could see as a really valuable asset to bring to our district, to be able to communicate with our 8 feeder districts and us on that alone would be a huge win.
Thank you. Rich?
I wonder if you can give just like 15 seconds on general, like, is it a relational database? Is it on Rackspace or Google? Like, just not a long thing, but just big picture, what is it?
Yeah, no, I can. And it's actually, there's information in the extended slide deck on this as well. So it is cloud-based. It's on an Azure platform the database is actually Snowflake database. And that's part of how we are working to be able to grant access to the actual data warehouse layer. So the actual data model layer that we can create measures and attributes that we can then profile and then allow access to, where people would be able to go in through the Snowflake interface and write a basic SQL query to pull data out.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
And if at the current level that we have, we are importing the SIS data, what can we learn from the SIS data in Data Zone that we can't learn from our SIS data ourselves? Are there like different, or is the whole value seeing other people's information? Is that the purpose or the sharing? But
no, within the analytics platform, there is a lot, right? Because it's taking all that SIS data and it's actually compiling it into metrics and charts to be able to look at it. So,
and the SIS doesn't do any of that?
The SIS doesn't, some do. I can't remember which student information system you are on. Diana, what SIS are you on? Infinite Campus. So Infinite Campus currently does not have an analytics component to it. Aries has some, Power School has some, but they're add-on pieces. So really, when you look at it, I guess the best example I could give would be, if you're bringing in like the SIS data, you can look at discipline disproportionality. You can look at grade disproportionality. You can break that out and disaggregate that data by race, by student program, and you can see it very quickly. And you can take that and then you could, if I can look and see, okay, I have X number of students with Ds and Fs, right? I can click and I can drill into that data to a student list that tells me, here's exactly my students who have Ds and Fs.
That we can't do with Infinite Campus.
You can through ad hoc queries, but you're going to have to write an ad hoc query, pull it out, and then bring it into Excel or something to do it.
I see.
Yeah.
And then is information about IEPs or 504s included in data zone? So like if an 8th grader had certain accommodations, we would know that when they come to us in 9th grade?
The
or is that not-
actual accommodations that are written in the 504 or in the IEP are not included in it because those are either held, the 504s don't tend to be held in the student information system. Some have modules that do. And the IEPs are being held in Cyrus and SACE. So that detailed information doesn't get held in the student information system. The data that does come in though is, and I don't want to get too detailed, but like the table A and table B data that you would see from SACE and Cyrus that you bring into your student information system, that does come in. So you can see if a student does have a 504, if a student is in special ed and receiving services, what their primary disability is, those sorts of things. And we're actually right now looking at how to source data from some of the CalPAS reports that are going directly from SACE and Cyrus in order to be able to see student percentage of time in mainstream and some of the other pieces as far as special ed setting.
Okay. Thank you.
Chris?
So you sound to me like an educator who's learned some of the tech talk. And anyway,
I have.
I think this is great. And what promise, it also seems to me that doing it at the county or by county level is sort of the right level to do it, that state would actually be too large, get economies in scale. We can't do it ourselves at the district level. So I like the placement of it and the promise seems great. Couple of comments. One, are there provisions for providing extracts for research purposes? So I work at Stanford. The Federal Administrative Statistical System has now set up systems. So this has great value and also is done in controlled ways that protect that, get rid of any individual identifiers. It's only aggregate data, stuff like that. So you can't backtrack it. Is that included within the thinking? Because that could be very useful to education at large, I think.
Yeah, it actually is. It was part of the original Silicon Valley Regional Data Trust concept. And that was a tri-county. That was San Mateo County, Santa Clara County, and Santa Cruz County. And the idea was to build out the student data warehouse across those 3 counties. And it was in partnership with UC Santa Cruz. But that stalled out quite a few years ago. So what we've actually done recently is we engaged in an MOU with Cal Policy Labs. And we've been working with them in order to just be able to be a connector between districts that would be interested in participating in research and some of the different research initiatives that are going on across the UC system. We don't have any, open access or open data portals for research.
And it wasn't thinking of that, but one, there may be federal funding to support this. And 2, I guess what I was hoping it might be built into the MOUs with the participating districts.
We didn't build it in. So one of the things that we know about when we engage with districts in this way is that the trust building aspect is the most important for us. We can, once we have that trust is established, we can really do anything that the district wants to do and wants to engage.
So maybe it's the next step. And I think there's
Yeah.
certain things you need to do to build the trust. And so
Yep.
I understand.
Yeah, and that's exactly it. And so for us, the most important thing for us is to be able to tell districts that nothing happens with this data without their direct consent.
Okay. I also wanted to comment on Trustee Stevenson's question about the individual people opting out of the system.